Hi there. For this activity, you were asked to try and match up some Supreme Court cases which align with particular amendments in the Bill of Rights. So in this video, we're going to go through each of those cases and pair them with the right amendments, and we'll see how you did. So the First Amendment guarantees the freedom of religion, speech, and the press, among other things. And the case that related to it was the Church of the Lukumi Babalu Ai versus the City of Hialeah from 1993. So the basic case involved a church that sacrificed chickens for religious purposes. The city tried to shut it down and pass amendments against animal sacrifice. Went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that the laws about sacrificing animals unfairly went against this particular church's beliefs, which violated the First Amendment. So they had to overturn those local laws. So that one is the First Amendment. The Second Amendment guarantees the right to keep and bear arms, and the case related to that is the United States versus Miller from back in 1939. So in this case, there were a couple of gangsters with sawed-off shotguns, and so they believed that they had the right to own those weapons under the Second Amendment to the Constitution. And the court ruled against them, saying that that type of weapon isn't necessary for the maintenance of a well-regulated militia, which is what the Second Amendment in the Constitution says. There have been a couple of more recent cases involving the state's rights to have different laws regarding gun ownership and for concealing handguns in people's ownership. So there are some other more recent cases that you might be interested to check out. The Third Amendment doesn't come up very often. It protects against the quartering of soldiers in people's homes, which, as you'll remember from the lead up to the Revolutionary War, was definitely a concern for Americans at the time. In this case, it was Engblom v. Carey from 1982. Again, this issue doesn't really come up very often, but in this particular case, there were correction officers, so at a prison, who had gone on strike, and they eventually had to lose their state-given homes so that the National Guard could come in and fill those duties at the police they were striking from. And the Supreme Court ruled that the National Guard are, in fact, soldiers. They are part of the armed service, and therefore the Third Amendment extends to employee housing. These were soldiers being stationed in people's homes, even though those homes were provided by their employer, and so they ruled in favor of the striking correction officers. The Fourth Amendment is a big one. It protects against unreasonable searches and seizures of your person and property. And the case here was Brendin v. California from 2007. So in this case, a passenger in a car that was pulled over was seized. So they were searched and drugs were found both in the car and on this passenger's person. So again, he was not the person who was pulled over. He was just a passenger in the car. And the Supreme Court ruled that passengers as well as drivers in a car that's been pulled over are subject to searches and seizures under the Fourth Amendment. So be careful who you bring in your car with you. Fifth Amendment protects a whole lot of things. Generally, they're related to life, liberty, and property. In this particular case, one of the things that it protects is your right to not self-incriminate. So you don't have to give yourself up in court if you're called to the witness stand and someone asks you, did you commit the crime? You don't have to answer. You can simply plead the fifth. So in this case, it was Salinas v. Texas from 2013. In this case, involved a person who had been brought in for police questioning over a murder and the weapon involved. In this particular case, the man who was in questioning, Salinas, was exhibiting what the police called some kind of questionable mannerisms, and he was silent. He didn't really say anything. And years and years later, there was other evidence that linked him to this crime, and so he was found guilty, and that earlier testimony from years before was used against him. And the Supreme Court argued that he had not declared his right to the Fifth Amendment, the right that protects against self-incrimination, because he had not clearly claimed his Fifth Amendment protection. He had just gone quiet. And so the court said, silence does not guarantee the right against self-incrimination. You must declare that right. You must claim it. The Sixth Amendment provides the rights of accused individuals in criminal cases. So this is cases where a crime has been committed. In this case, it was Smith versus Hooey from 1969. One of the main rights of the accused in criminal cases is a speedy and fair trial. This individual had been detained and was awaiting his trial and was writing letters over and over to the court requesting a trial. And it took years and years before they finally gave him a trial. And so the court ruled in Smith's favor, saying that the state had not made a legitimate effort to give a trial in a speedy and efficient manner. The Seventh Amendment is very similar, but it has to do with civil cases. So a civil case is a case between two individuals or private citizens, so typically involving a lawsuit, suing someone in some way. So in this case, it was Markman versus Westview Instruments from 1996. It had to do with patents on calculators. And in this case, the Seventh Amendment applied because it was two individuals. There was not a crime involved. There was just two individual companies that were suing each other. And the judge held that the judges can make interpretations of patent claims, not juries, so that a judge could make this ruling, not a jury. That's why this had to do with the Seventh Amendment. The Eighth Amendment protects against excessive bail and fines, but it's most notable for the protection against cruel and unusual punishments. In this case was Madison versus Alabama from 2019, so this is a very recent one. And in this case, the individual who had been sentenced to death had suffered a series of strokes in the past, and so he could not remember, cognitively could not remember having committed the crime. And so the Supreme Court, well, the individual Madison claimed that he should not be put to death. But the Supreme Court said that the Eighth Amendment doesn't protect a prisoner who can't remember committing the crime, but it does prevent against execution or the death penalty if the prisoner cannot rationally understand the reason for the execution. So not being able to remember the crime doesn't necessarily protect you, according to the court, but you would be protected against the death penalty if you cannot cognitively understand why you are being executed. All right, so if you want to see some more issues involving the Bill of Rights in the news, you can check out this link. There's an optional XP assignment for it. But I hope this helped you understand how the Bill of Rights, those 10 amendments, match up with specific cases in the past and where we might see issues like that arise in the future. Thanks for watching.